Hello and welcome all to the first episode of this new series, Historical Footnotes. In this series we shall discuss parts of history that are not necessarily talked about very much on the internet or in school textbooks and have been relegated to mere footnotes in the historical record of the public consciousness. This episode we will be discussing the one who fought communism all across the globe, the soldier of three armies, Lauri Törni. Lauri Törni was born on the 28th of May 1919 in Viipuri province in Finland. Most of his early life remains undocumented, but it is known that he went to business school in Finland and volunteered in Finland's civil militia, colloquially known as the White Guard. In 1938 he enlisted into the 4th Independent Jaeger Infantry Battalion and was stationed in the Karelian Isthmus at Kiviniemi, modern-day Lossivo, Russia. The next year, the Winter War broke out after a false flag attack by the Soviet Union, which came in the wake of Finland refusing Soviet territorial demands to cede most of the Karelian Isthmus to the Soviets. Törni's unit was one of the units sent to fight the Soviets near Lameti by Lake Lagoda. During these engagements, Törni's actions caught the eyes of higher-ups in the Finnish army, which subsequently led to him being pulled from the front lines and sent to an officers' academy where he learned to be a commander, eventually being commissioned into the army with the rank of Venriki, roughly equivalent to the US rank of second lieutenant. The story here goes that, outnumbered and running out of ammunition, Lauri skied through the night through enemy lines to reach a command post to request reinforcements. By the time he had finished officer training, Finland had already lost the war, albeit dealing a hefty blow to the Soviet forces in the process. Though still an officer in the Finnish army, with no war to fight, Törni shipped out to Vienna to train with the Waffen-SS. There are several conflicting accounts of what happened in Austria, one being that while there he made a pledge to join the SS that swore loyalty to Germany and to Hitler, a decision that would come back to bite him in the arse. The other being that while he was there he did not make the pledge, and due to pressure from Finland, which Germany really wanted as an ally for a number of reasons, and his exceptional promise as an officer, he was made exempt from it. Which one of these is true isn't quite clear, but while in Austria he also made several contacts which he would remember for later use. While Lauri was abroad, Nazi Germany began Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, an act which would bring Finland, a staunch enemy of the Soviet Union, back into conflict with its much larger communist neighbour. Törni finished his training in July, attaining the SS rank of Untersturmführer, roughly equivalent to the rank he held in the Finnish army. After a short stint commanding an SS machine gun unit, he promptly returned to his home country and returned to the fighting in Karelia. In Finland, he was put in charge of a captured tank battalion. As in the First Winter War, Finland ended the war with more tanks than it started, most of them Russian due to Soviet poor management of armour, that led to large numbers of tanks being captured by the Finnish. In 1943, he became captain of a Special Forces detachment, which affectionately became known by his soldiers as Detachment Törni after its leader. The unit was tasked with travelling behind Soviet lines and disrupting their logistics and attacking the motis the Soviets created, small pockets of Soviet resistance filled with soldiers that clustered together to avoid Finnish ambushes, which served only to make them easier targets for Finnish infantry. Törni's men fought on skis, as did many Finnish soldiers, using their skis to greatly enhance their mobility, a fact which the Soviets, despite having witnessed over 2 years prior in the First Winter War, had still not taken advantage of to make their own ski troops. Detachment Törni took part in the final battle of the war, and was distinguished in doing so, encircling and destroying Russian forces so effectively that the Russian High Command issued a bounty of 3 million Finnish markas, equivalent to $650,000. In the end, no one ended up collecting on it, and for this, Törni was knighted and given the Mannerheim Cross. In mid-1944, however, the Finnish sought peace with the Soviets, seeing how the Western Allies had landed in France and were pushing towards Germany. Continuing to fight the Soviet Union would put them in a bad position geopolitically, as the Western nations were more likely to see Finland as an enemy and an ally as Nazi Germany. Though they succeeded in getting a ceasefire and a proper end to hostilities without sacrificing too much, Lauri Törni was not happy. He feared the Soviet Union, who had already initially attacked Finland under false pretenses in 1939, would do so again, and that his country would one day fall under Soviet occupation. At this point, he drew on his pool of contacts, or more specifically, his pool of contacts drew on him. In 1945, he was brought back to Germany, where he underwent training to carry out a guerrilla insurgency, in case Finland were ever to be overwhelmed. He trained for 3 months, until it was deemed unfeasible to continue the training due to the ever-encroaching Soviet front line. He was unable to return to Finland for the same reason, so he returned to the Waffen-SS with his new rank of Hauptsturmführer, which is, again, equivalent to captain, and then went to Schwerin, where the Soviets were attacking. After fighting on the Eastern Front for several months, Törni transferred to the Western Front. He saw no point in fighting the Western Allies, as they were unlikely to become enemies of Finland anytime soon, and promptly surrendered to a British unit in West Germany. He was brought to a prisoner of war camp in Lübeck, with the war more or less over. He broke out of the camp and travelled back to Finland to meet up with his family, who had been forced out of Karelia by Soviet occupation. Before he could do so, however, he was arrested and charged with treason for joining a foreign military. This was not helped when the SS were deemed to not be a military organisation, but in fact a criminal organisation. A criminal organisation that he had joined and made a pledge of allegiance to. At least according to the courts, they evidently took the first order of events. He attempted to escape, but was soon caught. The trial lasted from October to November of 1946 and ended in Törni being sentenced to 6 years in prison to start in January 1948. Almost 2 years later, however, he was pardoned by the Finnish president Juho Paasikivi. Lauri, Finland, please. I try my best, but I will never be able to pronounce some of these things. In December of 1948. By this stage, it was fairly evident that Finland was geopolitically in a safe place, and there was very little chance of Finland being occupied, having taken as close to a neutral position as he possibly can in the mess that was the Cold War. But this was not enough for Törni. In 1949, his quest to continue fighting the ever-expanding influence of communism across the world, Törni crossed the border to the city of Haparanda in Norrland, Sweden. Incidentally, is also the birthplace of Per Hulkoff, one of my favourite musicians. And from there he took a train to Stockholm, where he then actually met his future wife, Maria Kops. In 1950, he then took a boat across the Atlantic to Venezuela, where he met up with his former commander, Colonel Moti Mati. Brilliant nickname. From there, took yet another ship up to the United States of America. This has never been definitively proven, but according to legend, when the ship drew close to the shore, Törni hurled himself off the ship and began swimming. He made landfall in Alabama and then travelled to New York City, where he settled in Brooklyn Sunset Park, where a Finnish-American community already existed. Here he worked as a carpenter for 3 years, technically as an illegal alien, until 1953, when an act of Congress was passed which granted him and a number of others a residence permit. Shortly after, in 1954, Törni became an American citizen, and he took this opportunity to demonstrate his assimilation into American culture by anglicising his name to Larry Thorne, which is how I will refer to him throughout the rest of this video. Thorne then joined the US Army and then the Special Forces. Despite starting only as a private, his experience was very quickly noticed by the higher-ups, and he was promoted very quickly. He used his previous experience and training in guerrilla warfare to teach skiing, wild survival techniques, and of course how to conduct a guerrilla insurgency, as he had previously been taught by the SS. He then attended a jump school and completed para-training immediately, followed by officer candidate training at Fort Benning, Georgia. After this, he was commissioned into the Signal Corps as a first lieutenant. From 1958, he would serve in the 10th Special Forces Group, based out of Bavaria. During this time, in 1960, he was promoted to the rank of captain. In 1963, he was deployed to South Vietnam to help assist their war effort against the North. Here, he was stationed at... I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. It's on screen. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I will butcher it. Vietnam, what have you done to our Latin alphabet? I mean, I know that France taught you and all, but still, please. Anyway, in Vietnam, Thorne joined up with Detachment A734 to provide guerrilla training to South Vietnamese locals, mostly ethnic minorities such as Khmer or Montagnards, which are Vietnamese Highlanders, who didn't really get on very well with the majority Vietnamese. And this created the Civilian Irregular Defense Group program, which is meant to, among other things, stop South Vietnamese youth from joining up with the National Front for the Liberation of South Vietnam, or Viet Cong as it's more colloquially known. At some point during this training, Thorne's defense group came under attack from Viet Cong. In this battle, he was wounded twice before the Viet Cong were actually repelled. For his actions during this firefight, Thorne would earn 2 Purple Hearts, one for each wound he received, and a Bronze Star for Valor. In 1965, after the false flag attack in the Gulf of Tonkin that led America to officially join the Second Indochina War, or Vietnam War, as a combatant, Lauri Thorne began his second tour of duty, this time joining the 5th Special Forces Group and then the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group, or MACV-SOG. In October of this year, Lauri Thorne would complete his final mission, taking part in a mission to locate and paint supply depots for airstrikes along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Thorne and his fellow Special Forces agents took off in a pair of Sikorsky CH-34 helicopters, and then met up with a Cessna Bird Dog light aircraft launching from another base. What exactly happened during the mission is unknown. What is known is that the 2 helicopters and the plane reached the landing zone over heavy cloud cover. One of the Sikorskys descended to drop off the Special Forces, while the other helicopter, which was containing Lauri and the other half of the Special Forces, hovered and the Cessna circled the area. However, by the time the first helicopter came back above the clouds, the Cessna and the Sikorsky were nowhere to be found. Lauri would never be seen alive again. After several search parties failed to find either aircraft, Lauri and the rest of the SFs were declared KIA. Although all of the SFs dropped off by the first helicopter survived and painted 51 targets which were later struck by American aircraft. Lauri was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Legion of Merit, and then a promotion to Major. In 1999, a Joint Task Force full accounting team came across Thorne's Sikorsky. It had been totaled in a crash and everyone inside was dead. Though the identities of the dead had been suspected at the time, it wasn't confirmed until 2003, when the remains were buried in Arlington National Cemetery, along with the other SFs that had died in the crash. Lauri Törni, the soldier of 3 armies. His life and his exploits would inspire a number of things in pop culture, works of literature, film, and music, such as the book Green Berets by Robin Moore, in which the character Sven Corny, Steve Corny, is based off him, and the extremely catchy heavy metal song Soldier of 3 Armies by Sabaton. Link in the description, by the way. At the end of his story, Törni had received the rank of captain in Finland and in Germany, and the rank of major in the USA. The medals he received were, from Finland, 2nd Class Medal of Freedom, 1st Class Medal of Freedom, 3rd Class Cross of Liberty, 4th Class Cross of Liberty, Mannerheim Cross. From Germany, the Iron Cross 2nd Class. From the USA, the Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart with Oak Leaf Cluster, Air Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Good Conduct Medal, the National Defense Service Medal with 1 star, the Vietnam Service Medal, and the Republic of Vietnam Campaign Medal. Thank you all for watching. This has been Historical Footnotes. I hope to see you in the next episode.